Why isn't it going faster? Why isn't it going faster? Why isn't it going faster? Make it go faster.
Good evening, everybody. 218 days, 15 hours, 51 minutes, and 14 seconds away from the start of next college basketball season. Welcome to Hoops HD's 2015-16 wrap-up report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. Let's get right into things here. Let me start by introducing our cast. And the guy at first who had the countdown clock was screaming at the top already. Let me start by introducing David Griggs. David, how are you tonight?
Not too good. You know that we've had this clock up since the end of the championship game, and only 2 days have elapsed on the clock since then.
Yeah, it's going to be a long off season, over 200 days away until we have our next meaningful college basketball games. Also back with us, Joby Fortson. Joby, how are you?
I'm still recovering from a great college basketball season and most depressing loss I've ever seen as a fan.
Joby, this is the first time we've had you back. First time we've had you back on since the loss. Are you okay there?
No, no, not at all.
Well, Joby, it's not like you're the first team to blow a 15-point lead, and actually not many teams have done
that. Wake Forest, as we found out, is one.
Yeah.
I think that's just karma kicking us in the ass.
Yeah, you much rather would have lost that Wake Forest game now, looking back, wouldn't you? But also, John Salika back with us. John, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay here. Now that we don't have any more live games, it's back to the home office for me.
Back to the home office, and last but not least, certainly John Titel with us. John, just finishing your first full season here at Hoops HD. How you doing?
It was been a great season. If the countdown clock hit 0, the way that the game clock hit 0 on Monday night, it's going to be a great fall.
Yeah, and let's start right with that. John T., let me start right with you. You having some Philly ties. I know you're not a Nova guy, but the city of Philadelphia bringing home its third national championship since 1985, and 2 of them have gone to the Villanova Wildcats. How about that for this game here that we saw?
It was an unbelievable finish. I'm worried actually about the things that are going to get lost by the amazing shot made by the hero Chris Jenkins. Number 1, Phil Booth off the bench with 20 points in 25 minutes, including 6 of 7 from the field and all 6 of his free throws and both of his three-point shots. I mean, one of the most clutch bench performances I've ever seen. I think it's going to get totally lost to history. Of course, number 2, Marcus Page with the second biggest three-point shot of the night, which should be one shining moment until there was another shining moment.
Well, I think that shot may get some history because I think those 2 shots back-to-back really is what made this game absolutely one of the most amazing championship games I've ever seen. David, your thoughts on the game that we saw here Monday night?
It really was spectacular, and it was kind of funny watching it. I had no rooting interest. I was glad Villanova won it because I believe it's the first time a non-FBS school, like a school that doesn't play FBS football, had won it since '85, which Villanova also won. It had been a minute. Teams have been really close. Butler got really close. The game was sensational all the way through it. I think we've seen some very well-played games in the championship that didn't have a finish quite as climactic as that. I still think, although the last few seconds weren't as exciting, I still think the Butler-Duke game from 2010 is one of the best college basketball games I've ever seen. This one was really good, but I would still rate Butler-Duke ahead of it and I know the stakes weren't nearly the same, but Kansas-Oklahoma earlier this year, but it was a sensational national championship game, and I'm so glad that it happened because the Final Four were, it was not exciting. We didn't have that many exciting Elite Eight games. After having a very incredible round of 64 and a really good round of 32, it was like the tournament had gone stale, but I love that is the lasting impression on the season. As a basketball fan, I loved it. I kind of hate that viewership was down 30%, but that had more to do with it being on cable instead of on, a free-to-air network. But what can you say? It was a great finish. It's been great since championship week. I mean, it's been great all season long.
Yeah. It's almost a minor correction here. When UConn won the '99 championship, their football team was still transitional up to the FBS level.
Oh.
So that may be the last quote unquote non-football team that won a championship, but they were transitional at the time. Very minor point though.
Right.
But really, '85 was the last true non-FBS team to win.
No, I stand corrected. I didn't realize that. And the last team to win it that didn't play football of any kind was Marquette, wasn't it? Or am
let me go to John. We'll go to Stalika. You're our history buff. Is that right? Is it Marquette?
It probably would be Marquette, but if you go back to 1990, UNLV would have also had a football team, but...
Yeah, they had football. Like Butler has football.
Don't just leave it at that. It would have been at the Division 1A level, but 1A in name only.
Yeah,
they were
I'd
awful.
argue those Duke teams in the early 2000s, late 90s didn't run football. So.
Yeah, 91, 92 Duke back-to-back championships. Those are and the 01 Duke team too. But Joby, we know you suffered in the Elite Eight, but you also got to see an All-ACC semifinal going as we thought it would.
Yeah.
But your thoughts on what the ACC did do in this tournament, which is pretty amazing.
The ACC. Hey, the ACC, because they took a lot of Big East teams. Let's not ignore the fact that Syracuse and Notre Dame, two of those key teams. And looking back, you also have a Louisville team who could have been an Elite Eight team pretty easily too, if things had gone right. But the ACC right now, I think, is the strongest conference. Right? They prove it every year in the tournament. They prove it. You see conferences like the Pac-12 and the Big 12 pop up, and they just don't perform. One tournament, and this is said a lot, one tournament doesn't prove everything. But a succession of tournaments where we see this, maybe not to the degree we did this year, but every year it seems that ACC teams go beyond their seed, whether it's NC States of the world, etc. And in this case, the time when you didn't see an ACC team go beyond their seed, they were upset by another ACC team. So it's a very strong conference. I think going forward, it's going to continue to do so because of the names, the coaches that play in that. We'll see, though, if it does take a step back, given you've got uncertainty with your national champion runner-up with the academic scandal. You have K's getting older. Does Pitino survive the offseason in Louisville? Those could really, and Boeheim obviously is near the end of his career.
And a coaching change in Pittsburgh.
These are things you have to watch. And a coaching change in Pittsburgh. Thank you. Yes, coaching change to the Big 12. Kind of not just also ran, but bottom feeder.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be very interesting. It could be a transition year. I still believe the conference will be as strong as ever, but it could be a transition year if things hit the wrong way.
John S., let me bring you in here on the other half, the other conference that was in the championship game, the Big East. Do you feel that the Villanova's championship here proved that the Big East really is still one of the dominant conferences, or was this just one team and the Big East still has issues such as what happened to your Xavier team?
I think it still proves that a champion can come out of the Big East like Villanova can, because they've shown really for the past 3 years they've been able to beat just about anyone in the country, and our feeling was that if they were finally able to get past the hurdle the second round this year, the sky is the limit. And in some ways, Xavier is going to be somewhat similar to where Villanova was 2 years ago, where they actually get a number 2 seed, did very well in the regular season, but bowed out early relative to the strength of their seed, even if it was a buzzer-beating shot. But Xavier and Seton Hall were the only disappointments this year in the tournament because Providence and Butler really played to their seed.
John T., the other conference that I think we need to discuss here, kind of in a wrap-up of this year's tournament, was the Big 12. And yes, Oklahoma was in the Final Four, losing the national semifinal, but we've now gone 4 straight years without a Big 12 team in the championship game. And the last Big 12 team to win it was 08 Kansas. Yet this conference seems year after year in the regular season to be just dominant. is there something wrong here in the Big 12? Maybe they're just it's too hard for the regular season and they don't have anything left.
You could certainly make that argument, especially with a early round flame out a la West Virginia or something. But Kansas lost to the national champion, Oklahoma lost to the national champion. So while I agree, if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best and all that stuff. But I don't think there's any. I mean, there's some shame in the Oklahoma loss because you still can't count that high with the margin. But no, I don't think there's any reason to hit the panic button on the Big 12. They're bringing in Jamie Dixon. They're bringing in my guy Brad Underwood. So I don't know that they're going to win a championship in the next 3 years or anything. But I think they've already brought in Shaka. They have Kruger. This is a conference that is fantastic with a bunch of great coaches who know how to win in March, and they're going to keep on getting there, and hopefully one of them will run up the ladder and hit the championship at some point.
Well, let's talk about that Villanova-Oklahoma game. And Joby, I think this is something that you wanted to bring up. The fact that this was the second time that Villanova and Oklahoma played this year, and the first time was the complete opposite. Absolutely complete opposite when Oklahoma destroyed them out in Hawaii. Does this say something about these early season games, or does it mean that these early season games are meaningless? Did you read anything into that?
I think, and you heard it from both Kruger and Jay Wright, as well as some of the players. Buddy Hield, I think, also mentioned this as well. The prior game had a direct impact on the second game. Did Oklahoma think they could do the same things they did, and it just didn't click as well? I mean, obviously, Buddy Hield had a very off game. Did Villanova learn things that were extremely valuable going forward? That first game, I think, was a great predecessor, a great predicate to show how teams develop and build throughout the year and how they change. The game mattered, and very much so. It mattered so much that Villanova probably would have. I think they'd one seed if they win against Oklahoma in December. Because that would have been just a huge win, yet another win on their resume, and I think they'd probably knock off Virginia from the top line if they have that Oklahoma win or the Virginia win. Both of those games probably either one reverses. I think Villanova's a 1 seed, and who knows if the tournament is different because of matchups. But early season matters, very much so, and we saw it here.
I was absolutely stupefied. I have never. I think it was one of the most surprising results. Not that Villanova won, but that they absolutely blew them through the roof. I mean, what was it? A 28-0 run? It was ridiculous. I think. I mean, their second biggest margin of victory was Fairleigh Dickinson. This was astonishing to me. Has a team ever played this well, ever, in the history of college basketball? On the men's side, I mean, UConn women certainly have, but, I mean, UNLV thrashing Duke, was that even as impressive as this? Was anybody else absolutely astonished by that? I was shocked.
I thought it was going to be bad when I saw Villanova just destroy Xavier on New Year's Eve, even though that was the day that Ed Sumner got injured. But this game between Villanova and Oklahoma, it was close for a half, and then suddenly it was like watching the 1985 Bears just make a scorched earth run through that game.
Yeah. Well, David, let me go back to here and kind of we discussed this Villanova-Oklahoma, the early season game. Kind of the issue here is these pre-Christmas time, these November and December games. How important are they really? And do we need more of these big name games like we had with Villanova, Oklahoma, and the like?
I think that they're extremely important. I mean, I think the regular season is important. I mean, if you think about it, there's 351 teams, and we're essentially eliminating throughout the course of the 30-game season over 300 of them from at-large consideration. So yes, I think they're important. I think especially if you're an under-the-radar team, they're important because that's when you start to make a case for yourself. I mean, if that's when Gonzaga makes a case that they belong in the tournament, and as does everyone else, Wichita State. So I would like to see more showcase games like that. One of my ideas, and I realize this is way out there, would be to have something similar to the Bracket Buster in mid to late February, where essentially there's a week where there's going to be 3 unscheduled games, and you could essentially create something like a tournament of 8 that works like a lot of these exempt tournaments, and it would basically manufacture more chances for out-of-conference showcase games and give teams that are really good but aren't in a power conference and don't get the chance at quality wins a chance to pick some up late in the year. Yes, I think they're important. Yes, I think teams benefit from them that do play them because the reward really outweighs the risk. What did Villanova lose from playing that game?
Are you saying like a Bracket Busters but for the major conferences?
Yeah, it's an idea similar. When I say Bracket Busters, I mean only in the idea that we're having unscheduled games. I mean, if I were czar for a day, and this won't happen for any number of reasons, I mean, you just have 3 unscheduled games in 1 week, and I would basically do it by putting teams in groups of 8 and even seed them 1 through 8, so maybe 10 or 12 tournaments of 8. And just bracket it and play it out.
But John T., do you like that idea?
Yeah, but I like it more in December, frankly, than in February, just because I kind of like teams gearing up for the conference tourney run and stuff. It's not a bad idea. Just I would shift it. And in terms of your original question, I love out-of-conference games against great teams. Just as a viewer, I don't know if the schools like it in terms of the travel. I don't know if people like it because they play in half-empty or worse arenas. There's a lot of reasons to hate it, but I mean, as a viewer, I think it's fantastic.
And that kind of reminds me of a point. David and I, along with Galen, had a chance to chat with Joe Lenardi a few nights ago, and he made a point about a team like Syracuse. We got the Carrier Dome with 30,000 seats in it, and a chance to sell 30,000 chipwiches every 22 times a year. Why are you going to start playing more road games? You should play all those home games and make all that money. And I don't know that there is a solution to solve that because it's tough to get Syracuse out of the Carrier Dome except for when the ACC mandates it.
Well, so you're trying to tell me that South Carolina, because they have an arena close to 20,000, figured, we'll just schedule as many bye games as we can, pad our win record, and the committee saw through that this year and wouldn't take them, not when you're non-conference SOS in the 300s.
You're hitting the issue, John. There is a solution. You leave Syracuse out when they're a bubble team like they were a few years ago, even more so than this year. You leave South Carolina out. It matters. They are punished. I mean, I think the system works pretty well right now. Because if you do that, you are you're putting yourself at risk. And I like this. I like the way the committee looks at it. That is out of conference strength of schedule is a factor, and I think that's a good factor.
Okay, our mock committee took. I mean, I realize that Syracuse, a lot of people like beating up on them, and in most years that makes sense. But this year they went down to Atlantis. Played very well. They went to Georgetown. They went on the road more than what they typically do this year. And I think they deserved to be in. I didn't want to sit there and argue with Joe because, I mean, I just told myself I wouldn't. I agreed with a lot of what he said. I think Syracuse absolutely deserved the bid. I really do.
And that's the point. Our mock committee did take them, although, Joby, you're the one that kind of convinced us all to take them. They were originally going to be out in our mock committee, and we took them over South Carolina, so us and the real committee both, I guess, got that right. But
John, it was the out-of-conference, the A&M win that did it more than almost anything else, along with the Boeheim absence. Those were my main points.
Let me go back to
I think the real committee actually looked the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John S. I know you want to discuss a little bit about the early season conference, the early season tournaments. We just kind of spoke a little bit about the idea of some mid-season tournaments, but if you look at like some of the events that happened this year that really kind of shaped this season, the Advocare I know was one that you really wanted to discuss here as an event that I think very early on shaped the entire season.
Right, because we had one Sweet 16 team in Notre Dame. We had 3 different teams that made it to the second round in Xavier, Iowa, Wichita State. a couple other first-round teams in Dayton and Southern Cal, and we're not even getting to the elephant in the room that's Monmouth, who was on the doorstep of the tournament, but for a multitude of reasons was actually left out. But if you look at the Battle of Atlantis, there was also an eventual Final Four team in Syracuse, a couple Sweet 16 teams in Gonzaga and Texas A&M, and then there was also UConn and Michigan and Texas who had also made the field as well.
Well, is there any other games that happened in that early season this year that you kind of think helped shape the season? David, let me throw it over to you, and then also John T.
Shape the season? I wasn't really ready. One of the ones that was defining to me, or two, were right out of the gate, and I'm going to reference them because of, first was Maryland and Georgetown. To see that renewed, and although on paper it may not have meant as much, it was a fantastic, electric March-type atmosphere in November, and I think if we could get more games like that, that would be better. It's like those games do work. I think it benefited both teams. And the other one, a game that Virginia lost, kind of similar as far as electricity, I know John Teitel was there, was when Virginia went to Georgetown. Or, I'm sorry, when Virginia went to George Washington. Now, did Virginia have everything to lose and nothing to gain? What did Virginia lose from playing that game? So shaping the season, I know that I didn't directly answer your question, but those are the kinds of games that I think college basketball needs more of prior to conference play, because they do generate interest. They are incredible atmospheres, and teams, the reward way outweighs the risk, in my opinion.
Right, and maybe that's more what I meant, like the games that really helped get things going, and we should see more of out there.
Yeah.
John T., let me throw it over to you, though. Same issue.
So I think the two that I'm going to point to in terms of non-conference play were in December. The theme of the season was that all the good teams kept getting knocked off by a bunch of bad teams. In December, number 1 Kentucky went to UCLA and lost by double digits. And then number 4 Kentucky hosted the Buckeyes and lost by 7 points. And this was just a sign of things to come. Last year, there were only 3 top 5 teams that lost regular season games to unranked teams that did not make the NCAA tournament 3 times last year. It happened twice to Kentucky in like 3 weeks, and then it happened 8 more times, 10 times this year, and my other panelists can speak to this. Number 4 Virginia losing at Va Tech and at Georgia Tech, and number 5 Xavier losing a home game to Georgetown and then an away game at Creighton. Guys, what's up with these great teams losing to these bad teams?
Yeah, I guess another one here, and Joby, Wisconsin, here's a team that really had a very interesting start to the season, losing home games to Western Illinois, later on to Milwaukee and to Marquette, leading into the coaching change, leading into a huge turnaround in their season.
Yeah, we talk about the importance of preseason. I think preseason accelerated Bo Ryan's decision, which settled the entire program. It's not because, Greg Gard was a better coach than Ryan. It was that, now we kind of have a view of the future, and the players knew they were kind of playing for Gard's job to a degree. They were at 6-5 halfway through December. 6-5. And they end up plowing through the Big Ten, doing a great job, deservedly, coming within a hair of the Elite Eight, and not by a fluke, as all Xavier fans can attest. This was a really good team that had to gel late, and it's a great example of the preseason getting your kinks out. It can really build your resume. The Oklahoma-Villanova examples that I was talking about before, having great games like Michigan State, Kansas, etc. But it also can get your kinks out and get it ready for the conference. If this had been football where you're intersplicing conference games early, Wisconsin might have found themselves really behind the 8 ball and unable to come back. I know if you lose a few times in football, it's more than basketball, but it really can disrupt your season, and it's over before it even begins. People were saying that about Wisconsin, but Wisconsin proved you have the chance to resurrect yourself. Of course, it also helps being in a Power 5 plus Big East. where you have the opportunities for those wins. But it's a great Wisconsin is a great little story this year. It's a pretty remarkable one.
John S., another discussion that always comes up is championship week. It's coming a week before the NCAA tournament. Teams are playing 3, 4, in rare cases even 5 games there. 3 out of the 4 Final Four teams this year did not win their conference tournaments. They were coming off of losses in their conference tournaments. Is championship week important, not important? Is it just a few more games now?
I mean, if you're Little Rock or Hawaii, it was very important because they're not getting into the tournament if they just with an at-large, because these were both teams that also wound up winning their first-round games. Even Chattanooga, they were a bit disappointing against Indiana, but still had a great regular season run, including a win at Dayton, and they had to nail and claw their way through the SoCon just to get their way into the NCAA tournament. So there is definitely some value that goes into the 2 weeks that constitute championship week.
Well, that's from the small conference. How about for the major conferences, though? I mean, is there something you saw here that you saw Villanova lose the Big East championship game. You saw, Syracuse flame out in the first round of the ACC. Is this, is it not as important if you're in the major conferences? Are coaches not taking it as seriously, do you think?
Well, if you're a team like Seton Hall, I can understand why you'd want to use all your bullets in the Big East tournament just to knock off the likes of Villanova and Xavier in hopes for a high seed. But even then, all they got out was a 6, and they got sent to a sub-regional with Utah and Gonzaga and couldn't make their way out of round 1.
Well, John T., let me throw the same question over to you. Do you think it's just coaches aren't caring as much and more gearing up for the NCAA, especially with the top teams?
I mean, having watched Coach Krzyzewski in person blow a 16-point lead in the second half to Notre Dame in the ACC tourney, I suppose it could be argued. But as a Pac-12 guy, I saw the Oregon Ducks go from a good team to a 1 seed in like 3 days by stomping the rest of the Pac-12. And I don't know if it helped them get to the Elite Eight. I don't know if they would have been I assume they would have been a 2 seed if they hadn't won it all, but it looked like it meant a lot to them. They were able to get a little momentum from it.
David, anything you want to add here?
I think it varies from conference to conference. In the ACC, I think it means a lot, if not on paper, off paper. On paper, I think Jerry Palm said something when we had him on earlier in the year that I agree with and that I felt a long time, is that to the committee, it doesn't matter if you play a game in a conference tournament or if it's in November. They kind of weight it the same. So it doesn't mean any more or less than had you played those games during the regular season. Off paper, I think I think some teams, if you need the automatic bid to get in, you're going to take the game more seriously and have a much bigger sense of urgency than a team that's safely inside the bubble or a team that's safely a protected seed. I just think mentally you're in different places, so it might mean more to one team than it does the other. And I even said, like, when Kansas lost in the Pac-12 tournament, or I'm sorry, when Oklahoma lost in the Big 12 tournament. I did not say Kansas Pac-12. I didn't. What did it mean? It meant that they got to relax for a couple days and get a little bit more rest before the NCAA tournament. And I think a team that's in that situation is in an entirely different place mentally than a team that needs to win 1 or 2 marquee games to boost their resume or win it all to get the automatic bid.
This is why I like Puppet Charles Barkley better than David Griggs, because at least he wouldn't can't. But let's move on to another subject now, and that was the rule changes that we saw this year. We saw probably the 3 biggest ones is more of the emphasis on some of the foul calls, the decreased shot clock, and less timeouts. There were a lot of other rule changes as well. Joby, let me start with you. Is there anything that you really saw from the rule changes that you think made the game better, made the game worse?
Yeah, one thing I was relieved about, because I was concerned it would make the game worse by creating more rushed offensive sets that were just bad basketball. And what I do not ever want to see the NCAA turn into, men's basketball turn into, is the NBA. Sorry, Jay Billis, you're wrong. It's the NBA to a lot of people is unwatchable. And Golden State's awesome, but that's because it's a college team playing in the NBA in a lot of ways, the way they play their game. The variety of styles is what does it.
Yes.
The more time on the clock you did. Now, I think, a lot of emphasis on, hand checking that carried over, et cetera. I think those were very good. I think you did see more movement. And the calls from people like me were not heated at 30 seconds. I think 30 seconds was fine. You start going below that, I know what it'll turn into. It'll turn into isolation offense, which is not fun in my opinion to watch, and it's not what the sport we love is actually based on.
John T., let me throw the same question to you. Do you agree with Joby there or disagree?
I agree. I was going to focus on the rule change more about the timeouts at the end, just having one less. As a guy who hates timeouts, I love the flow. I understand if you have a young team or if you need to set up the final play, but I love the fact that they got rid of the timeout, and frankly, if they can get rid of another one or two, that I would not have a problem with that either.
Yeah.
John S., let me bring you in here also. Is there anything more you think that from the rule changes we saw this year that you'd like to see them do to make it even better game?
I don't think it's the fact that there was one less timeout, but the fact that coaches could no longer call a timeout themselves while the ball was in play because it was now purely up to the players. And there were a few situations where it seemed like people were expecting a coach to call it, but they would play on, and in some cases teams did actually benefit because they would score on a possession when a coach would typically call timeouts. Because I think Xavier benefited late in the game at Providence early in the year when McCura shot a three when Mac was trying to call a timeout, but the refs weren't heeding his call, and thankfully that took place.
Yeah, I don't know that I was that crazy about that rule, honestly, myself. I just think it kind of, ended up with situations where teams were also having, not calling a timeout when they should have because the coach is yelling, and they're yelling and screaming as players who aren't paying attention to him. And maybe this is something that just, as we go on a few more years of this, they'll learn better. But David, your thought on the rule changes?
I really liked all three that you mentioned. The shot clock, I wasn't as concerned about that. My preference was, and actually still is, that it be at 35, but I think it's fine at 30. I had no issues with it at 30. I certainly wouldn't want to see it any lower than that. Joby already talked about why. The biggest thing, in my opinion, that made the game better was it is no longer a rock fight rugby scrum. Knocking the crap out of somebody is no longer standard defensive procedure. I think it brought a lot of skill back to the game. You watch old games on YouTube, which just about all of them are up. If you watch Hoya Paranoia, this was big bad Georgetown. They weren't nearly as physical as the game was getting to be. It wasn't even close. And I remember saying after last year's NCAA tournament that had these teams played in the tournament 20 years earlier, everybody would have fouled out in 5 minutes. I think it made the game better. I think it made it more exciting. I think it made it more watchable. After we had those eye-gouging foul parades early in the year, which were unavoidable because players needed to adjust, the game, in my opinion, was clearly better. I was in favor. Something I do not want to see that currently doesn't exist that's being talked about, I don't like the idea of being able to advance the ball when you call timeout. I think that's ridiculous in the NBA. Let's apply that logic to football or any other sport. Like, you don't get to call timeout in baseball and suddenly be on second base. You don't get to call timeout in football and advance the ball 50 yards. You should get the ball where you signaled for the timeout. And I'm not a fan of quarters. Women's basketball went to it. I don't like it. I know people look at me like I'm crazy. I'd just as soon see 2 30-minute halves in football. It's another timeout. It's stopping for no reason. Like, 20-minute halves is what it should be.
Well, let
I
me
think you would not be a fan of having 6 fouls in a game because
No, not
there was
at
an
all.
experimental rule this year for the NIT and all
Not
the
at all.
other smaller postseason tournaments.
No, not at all.
let me throw
Yeah,
up
and
another subject
football. The
here.
reason why
Sorry,
football has quarters is when. Yeah.
What's that?
go ahead, Joby. I'm sorry.
The reason why football has it is a different reason than basketball. Football, often the direction you're going has a distinct advantage or disadvantage based on the weather. You don't have that in basketball.
Yeah, but
Unless you're in
The way
Arizona State.
college basketball has the yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to
College
say San
basketball-
Diego.
college basketball-
Yeah.
Keep it. You know, I'm with David. Keep it. 20 minutes is unique to college basketball. It makes it keeps people. It keeps the players having to show some endurance. It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I want to bring up a topic here that I don't know that I'm going to get any love for from any of you, but I just want to throw it out here. When the NCAA tournament expanded to 64 teams, we were down in probably 250 teams in Division One. We're now over 350 teams in D1. We've had minor expansion from 64 out to 68 in that time, but the percentage of teams making the NCAA tournament is a lot smaller than it was when it last expanded. We've also seen in the last decade or so 11 seeds and 10 seed this year making the field, teams that were clearly bubble teams, teams that had a different vote going a different way in the committee would not have been in. Syracuse, there's absolutely an argument for them to have not been in. George Mason, when they made the Final Four, arguments were made that they should not have even been in the field. If we're having teams that are barely making it that are good enough to make the Final Four, do we need more teams in the tournament? Is it time to seriously consider going out to a 96 team field? Now, let me preface this also by mentioning the fact that this is all driven by TV money, and Turner/CBS's deal with the NCAA is going on for another 8 to 10 years at least, so it's not actually going to happen. But is it something that is worth considering if you're seeing 10s and 11s making the finals? And John T., I know you shook your head right away, so let me let you have first crack at me there.
Short answer is ain't broke, don't fix. We just watched the most exciting finish in the history of the sport. Leave it as it is because it's not broken. Secondly, as D.C. is the capital of the basketball world outside of Philadelphia, with the George Washington Colonials winning the NIT, I assure you, GW should not have made the tourney. If they made a 96-team tourney, they were not going to make the Final Four. But it was really fun to see them be the 69th best team in college basketball and get to the Garden and win a title.
David, you've got your
No.
no.
No. I mean, one of the things I love is what I said earlier, and that's the idea that we eliminate 300 teams throughout the course of a 30-game season. I love how the season plays into the NCAA tournament. I think that there's been teams that didn't make the World Series that could have won it had they made it. There's probably been NFL teams that didn't win the Super Bowl that could have won it had they made the playoffs. I think I don't have a problem with a team that could win 2 or 3 games in the NCAA tournament missing the tournament because they didn't get it done during the regular season. The season plays into it. I think that we're right at the sweet spot. As far as how big the field needs to be in relation to how many teams there are. Again, GW had a chance to get in. It wasn't that they didn't get a chance. We don't need to expand it to give them a chance because they already have a chance. They actually have 2. Their 30-game season and then the conference tournament after that. Leave it the way it is. I am in favor of actually going back to 64 if we do anything, but that you can't unring that bell.
Yeah. Well, Joby, I assume you're also on the no, let's keep it at 68 or smaller bandwagon, but would it not give a chance to a Monmouth and the like? I mean, what about these small companies?
I have for one.
Joby,
I think the 300 argument is. I think the 300 plus argument is false because while Division I has grown, the number of quality programs, I'm sorry to say that, hasn't really dramatically grown. I'm sorry. People are moving up to D1 for revenue purposes, not
Lopes.
because they have a great basketball.
the Lopes!
Team of the people, Team of the people excluded.
Yeah.
One exception that proves the rule.
Yeah.
But it's a faulty argument. You don't have. Yes, you've had the Monmouths. The Monmouths have been around, but they were named Vermont. But they were named Valparaiso. They were named. It's not like we've grown that at the exact same time. You need to keep the quality high. And then the other reason, there's one other reason that is very real. When you're dealing with 64 teams, which is really when the public starts paying attention, they don't really pay attention to the Tuesday and Wednesday night games. You can fill out a bracket that's manageable. And this thing is driven by unofficial gambling. Let's not kid ourselves. If all of a sudden the secretary in the office doesn't have the ability and isn't going to spend time picking 30 extra games, she's not. And it's all of a sudden you're taking away one of the most fun components. People like us will fill out 96 games, but yeah, it's perfect. It's symmetrical. Keep it the way it is. You tinker with it too much, you're going to kill the golden goose.
And John S., you could agree with everyone that I'm dead wrong about expanding the field.
I think it's okay to keep it at about 35 or 36 at-large teams as it is right now, because as David Griggs had pointed out, I mean, you get both the conference tournament and the regular season to make your case, and as of next year, we will have all 32 conferences holding a conference tournament now that the Ivy will be holding a 4-league tournament at the Palestra for the final weekend.
Yeah, whether we agree with that or not, no, John T., you don't. But let me want to hit one other topic. I know I didn't mention this before we went on the air, but was a brief mention about the women's game earlier. And the Yukon Huskies this year continued, 4 straight national championships? I don't think they've won a game since Thomas Jefferson was president. They've lost a game since Thomas Jefferson was president. John T., I don't know how much of the women's game you follow or not, but is that good for the sport or bad for the sport of women's basketball that this Yukon team is just more dominant there than Golden State is in the NBA?
It depends on how you define the sport. Is it good for everyone ranked number 2 to whatever? No, because you can't beat this team because they're so good. Is it good for people at home who want to watch closely contested games? Absolutely not. I was flipping back and forth, and I think the Syracuse women had cut the title game. They went on a 16-0 run. I'm like, oh my God, could they? And I looked, and they were still done by like 19 points or something. I mean, the level of domination is just insane. That being said, if you like to see dominant teams, once-in-a-lifetime teams, this is your team. Breanna Stewart, I don't know if she's the best women's player ever, but she's won 4 in a row, and she won 4 Tourney MOP awards, and Gino's got 11 titles and 11 rings for 10 fingers. They're amazing.
I mean, if there's no parity in the women's game, how do you explain the early departures of Notre Dame and South Carolina, who were both top seeded and didn't even make it to the Elite Eight?
I kind of take. I actually appreciate the women's game. I think the skill and the strategy and the coaching in a lot of ways are better. I kind of take issue with people saying Gino Auriemma is ruining the women's game. It's not that I don't understand that point of view can be made, but I think it's being made by people that don't watch women's basketball anyway, so why are you speaking? A, and B, what are you supposed to do? Tell them not to win as much? Make it so UConn can only have 6 scholarships? And again, was the dream team good for the Olympics? Why is it that we want to see, as John pointed out, these once-in-a-lifetime teams? I think what he's doing is absolutely phenomenal in not just women's basketball history, but sports history. How is what he is doing bad? The only people that seem to be saying that are people that don't watch the sport anyway, in my opinion. It's like, oh, I'd watch women's basketball, but UConn wins too much.
Well, I agree with you, and I think it actually does drive up a level of interest for people who don't watch a lot of women's basketball. Say, hey, I got a chance to see something I'll never see again here.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't
wait till it will happen. It will happen. There will be another team will serve as David to UConn's Goliath at some point. And that happens, all eyes will be there. Baylor kind of did that a little bit, with Grenier and all that. And there was great viewership and attention. When it happens again, and it will, because no one stays on top forever, it's going to add that extra drama. As long as UConn's still really good when it happens and they don't fall off a cliff for a year, that's going to be a lot of fun. Whether it was Tennessee UConn, Baylor UConn, you're going to see another team, and that will help things as well.
David, I know there's one other topic you wanted to hit, and that was
yes. Let's move on to the border war.
I was going to take a little bit off of Kansas. I was going to head out to Arizona, actually.
Yes.
The Grand Canyon Antelopes, they were our team this year. Made it to the CIT, lost to Coastal Carolina there, but we had a lot of fun with them this year, didn't we?
We did. We started this 2 years ago, actually. I guess the season before this, and the idea was to adopt a team that was below the sight line and give them ridiculous coverage and praise and talk about them all the time and tweet at them. And we didn't even call them the team of the people. They were our adopted team. I think that developed. It was just after they had beaten, was it Michigan? I don't remember if it was after that game, but they had won a big game, and I think we just spontaneously blurted out on the air that NJIT is the team of the people. So that's where that came from, and we had so much fun with them that we just didn't think anybody else could possibly match that. We went with Grand Canyon this year, and I mean, they were a blast. They were fun. It was fun interacting with their fans on Twitter. There was other student athletes at Grand Canyon that played other sports that kind of followed us. We called Mark Emmert. That was great. We petitioned the White House. We Twitter bombed the NCAA with pictures of Howard Beale, and they got it. I think that they really enjoyed the interaction. We certainly did, and they were fun. And at the end of the day, antics aside, we weren't doing this to mock them. We kind of got criticized that with NJIT. No. They were in a very unique situation, being as good as they were as a traditional team, and they had a historic season. No transitional team has ever finished in the top 100 of the RPI. Grand Canyon did. So sincere congratulations to a team that did very well, better than anyone that's ever been in that situation. I love them. I don't know if we'll go with them next year or not. I won't be as sorry if we did, because we had so much fun with them.
Well, on that note, I just want to run through each of you here if there's anything else you want to discuss or any other final thoughts about what we saw this season. John T., let me start with you.
My final thought is the one tourney game I'm never going to forget, which is impossible because we just saw the greatest finish to a tourney game ever, is the 4-point double overtime Texas A&M Northern Iowa second-round game. 31 seconds left. The Panthers called timeout with a 10-point lead. 26 seconds later, they've committed 4 turnovers. The game goes to overtime. The biggest final-minute comeback in the history of Division I basketball. I still, and we'll never know how it happened because I still don't believe what I just saw. It was unbelievable, and I wish I could have a better memory, but that is going to be my lasting memory.
John S.
It was kind of a nice season to hit the road on a few occasions, not just for some Xavier games at the Cintas Center, but also my first trip to Northern Kentucky to see them play Valpo earlier in the year, and we'll be looking forward to Norsup next year when NKU is finally going to be eligible to potentially participate in the NCAA tournament. And then let's not also forget the road trip to New Jersey to see Seton Hall and Xavier, and also Monmouth and Niagara early in the year. So it was nice to see a wide array of college games this year.
Joby?
What's unfortunately going to stick with me is that god-awful ending with my team. Looking ahead and seeing what could have been, because you, at certain times during the season, whipped both teams in the championship game. yeah, and so you actually had a shot. But that leads to the real, I think, the broader point. I'm sorry to see people like Malcolm Brogdon and Anthony Gilgo from a Virginia perspective, but look across college basketball this year. We didn't have the Duke one and done with Justice Winslow and Okafor and Tyus Jones. The dominant teams this year, whether it be Virginia with the two I named, Buddy Hield sitting at Oklahoma, Arch at Villanova with Okafu. I always can't pronounce his name, but
Jeffrey, yeah.
Even North Carolina, who had the elite, players. Marcus Page and Bryce Johnson are seniors. Jenkins, who nails the final shot as a junior. Denzel Valentine, a great Michigan State team, and Costello. Seniors, and a few juniors. This is awesome. And you got to know these people over the years. You've heard of them, even if they became the big stars this year like Buddy Hield. Preseason, John Titel's talking about Buddy Hield. We're going to, hopefully, this is the way it's going to be, because I actually prefer it that way because it leads to storylines that build upon each other. And I look forward to who the Buddy Hield of 2017 is going to be.
I'm sure Joey's going to be looking forward to Grayson Allen making one more trip around the ACC for next season.
Grayson Allen and his trip in.
He might be the Buddy Hield, unfortunately. How about he's the Buddy Hield?
Buddy Hield. That's getting bad. David?
Stepping a little bit out of character here, I just think in general, looking back at all this, I think I've had more fun with Hoops HD than any of the years we have done it before. We kind of start in October getting with the preseason stuff. I remember watching that first exhibition game, like LSU Alexandria with Chad against Sela, and just the whole season was great. Like, I don't play online games or like World of Warcraft. I don't play fantasy sports. I do this, and I love doing this. I want to keep doing this. I'm kind of sad when the season was over, like when the shot went in. Oh, what an incredible shot. But it's like another part of me was, don't we get 5 more minutes? And not only do we not get 5 more minutes, we don't get anything until those first exhibition games in October. So I don't know. Not to get sentimental on this, but I love doing this, and I have a blast doing it with you all.
And I need to echo that thought. I mean, we really just had a great time this year. I mean, I will never forget sitting here on a podcast during championship weekend about 2:00 in the morning, dialing the NCAA, and actually having Mark Emmert's, what we thought was we actually transferred to Mark Emmert's desk according to their voicemail system, and honestly not know what I was going to say if you actually answered the phone somehow. But it was just a blast this year. I had a ton of fun here, and we're not done by any means. We're not going to disappear until October. We will probably be coming at least once a month with a podcast like we try to do during the off season. We'll have articles posted on the website about any news that happens. But really, the excitement is kind of over until we reach November and the season starts again. But I do want to thank each of you for another great season as well, and everybody out there who's watched us all year.
All right.
Thanks a lot, and have a great night.